There appears to be a shift in strategy when it comes to the fight over a U.S. Senate seat in Texas. This is the matchup between Republican Senator Ted Cruz and Democratic Congressman Colin Allred, who calls Dallas home.
So our partners at Texas Monthly, they're taking a closer look at the appeal that Cruz appears to have on some Democrats. But it's all laid out in a new article written by Alexandra Samuels, who's joining us now. We are so thankful to have you with us. So first things first, we know that Cruz isn't the only one here trying to reach across party lines. This is kind of what we see around this time of year and in these sort of run-ups. Allred, though, he's touched on topics that really are sticking with the Republican Party, which is not the party he identifies with. So what issues are each candidate here focusing on? And the question I think all of us have is it working?
Yeah, so both of them have focused pretty heavily on policies surrounding the Texas-Mexico border. So in early March, you have Allred, who joined some congressional Democrats in launching a new group calling for bipartisan solutions on immigration and pushing back against some Republican criticism that Democrats don't care about the border. Allred has also been critical of President Biden's handling of the southern border and was one of nearly a dozen congressional Democrats who voted in favor of a resolution saying that Biden's, quote, open border policies created a national security and public safety crisis. Cruz, on the other hand, has taken a more hardline stance on the border. So earlier this year, when Senate negotiators unveiled a bipartisan border plan that would have put harder caps on the number of migrants admitted into the U.S., Cruz said that that deal didn't go far enough, and he instead advocated for a bill passed by the House that was a little more restrictive. But then that deal fell apart. The Senate deal fell apart after former President Trump blasted it publicly. I think that's a good question about whether it's working. I think it may be a little too soon to say whether these approaches are working with voters per se, but the border is a politically smart issue for them both to focus on. According to a February 2024 poll from the Texas Politics Project, 24% of registered voters listed border security, as the most important issue facing the state, and immigration was ranked as came in second at 18%.
Yeah, and we're seeing immigration not only in Texas polls, but polling nationally as well. It's a hot button topic. People are interested in it. So a little deeper dive. You ended up following Allred's campaign during the primaries, and the reality is he rarely campaigns in Texas. Is that changing, or has that changed based on what you've seen?
So I actually received an email from his campaign team earlier this week, and it noted that the congressman traveled across several Texas cities in the span of 4 days. So in that one trip, he made stops in Johnson City, Victoria, Houston, Laredo, and Irving. And prior to that, in late March, he was in San Antonio for a roundtable where he discussed rising healthcare costs. So it does look like he's putting in the mileage to get his message out to a statewide audience. And that's a smart campaign move. You know, we see it paying off in some respects. Earlier today, in fact, his campaign announced that it had raised $9.5 million in Q1. But traveling the state is also a smart move for Allred because Cruz enters this race with the advantage of incumbency. Plus, a good number of voters are still getting to know Colin Allred and who he is and what he represents. That same poll that I cited earlier showed that nearly half of Republicans and 36% of registered voters overall in Texas didn't know enough about him to really have an opinion on him one way or another.
I'm really glad that you brought that up, Alexandra, because I think a lot of people are looking at this matchup as a little bit of an unexpected duel, if you will, because of Cruz's incumbency here. And if we talk about the numbers, you know, he's still campaigning. He still, you know, has his political power in that way. But what are the polls showing us, if anything?
Yeah, so polls show a somewhat tight race, but to be clear, it's very much Cruz's race to lose. At the end of the day, Texas is a reddish state that has not elected a Democrat in nearly 3 decades to a statewide seat. So in terms of polling specifically, though, 538 reports that Cruz has a pretty solid high single-digit lead over Allred. So there was one poll fielded in mid to late February that showed the two men neck and neck at 41% among registered voters, but a more recent poll from Marist College, which came out in March, gave Cruz a 6 percentage point edge over Colin Allred.
It's a good, deeper discussion on all this tonight. Alexandra, we thank you. You can read, by the way, more about her article or read it online right now if you want to, texasmonthly.com.